You're listening to the Teaching Toolbox with Brittany and Ellie. Join them as they talk all things middle school.
Hey there, it's Brittany, and I'm here with Ellie.
Hello there.
And we are here to talk today about being a middle school teacher with parent-teacher conferences coming soon. If you're one of those teachers, you're in luck today because we have an episode where we'll be sharing tips and strategies to make the most of your meeting time with parents. Whether it's teacher-parent conferences or students are involved as listeners or leaders, we're going to cover it all in this episode of the Teaching Toolbox. So what were your conference formats like, Ellie? Did you have parent-teacher conferences or parent-teacher and students? Like, how did your conferences run?
I'd say throughout my career, whether it was elementary school or middle school, it was typically parent-teacher conferences. Sometimes a student might be present and they might sit in for a little bit, but it wasn't the norm. So it was basically parent-teacher conferences. When I was in elementary school, that was basically one-on-one. So we would have the conferences with the students from our homeroom. If by chance we switched for anything, we didn't meet with those parents of other classes. We just met with our own homeroom students unless someone requested to have a conference. But it was basically myself with the parent for every single student. And those were probably, I'm thinking 15 to 20 minutes long. And then in middle school, we met as a team of teachers with any parent that requested a conference. It seemed like in elementary school, almost every single parent came in for conferences. In middle school, out of a team of 120 students, we might have 40 or 50. So it wasn't every single parent that came in, but when they did, they came in and we met with them as an entire team. And those conferences were also about 15-ish minutes. How about you? What were your conferences like?
At the elementary school I worked at, we did it much like yours. We met with just our homeroom kids. Our conferences were 20 minutes long. Mm-hmm. And again, we met just with the parent. Usually just one parent would show up, and occasionally they would bring a child with, but usually it was just teacher and parent. So very much like what you were saying with yours. When I moved to the middle school I worked at, we actually did student-led conferences.
Oh,
and
wow.
So the student was in charge of the conference. We would schedule conferences every 10 minutes.
Okay.
And teachers would rotate, but we'll get into more of that later. So it was teacher, student, parent. And out of the about 120 students that we had, we were required that everybody have a conference. But I would say, we would have no-shows and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I would say we would get maybe about 100 out of the 120 would show up for conferences.
Wow.
So
yeah, in middle school, they only had a conference if the parent requested it. If the parent had to sign up for the conference time, otherwise they didn't have a conference. Did you have them every quarter, or did you have them once or twice a year? How frequently did you have your conferences?
We had ours twice a year. Well, in elementary school, we only had once a year. We had October was our conference. Okay. And then if parents wanted a conference at another time, you would mm-hmm. obviously, agree to that if there was issues or whatever. But formal conferences were only held in October. In the middle school, we had them twice a year, October and March. October were mandatory, everybody has to meet. Mm-hmm. And then March were only students you had concerns about. And so you might only meet with like 20 or 30 at that point out of the 120. Okay. How about you?
Yeah, we had twice a year, both elementary and middle school. So they were November-ish, usually a little bit before Thanksgiving, and then March, April. So it's typically first quarter and third quarter. And elementary school, it was the same, and you got almost all parents in both of those those time periods. And then middle school, as I said, if they scheduled it, then they came in. Typically, a lot more came in November, not quite as many in March. And sometimes you really, really, really wanted certain people to come in, and they just did not, unfortunately.
Did you ever get administrative support during your conferences?
There were times that we did request that an administrator be there. Yeah. And so if we needed them, they usually put out a message before conference time saying, if you need our presence, if you need somebody to be there, please let us know, and someone will be there for you. Because we had a principal, we had 2 assistant principals, and then oftentimes we might have guidance counselors that would come and sit in. So we did have support in that way. Yeah. How about you?
Same here. And that was very helpful, very good to hear, especially, having guidance counselors or sometimes we'd have the school psych or the school resource teachers be present and stuff. So, just having that extra support sometimes gives you confidence to talk about what you need to talk about, or, the strength to handle a difficult subject or whatever.
Right, so. Right. And that's especially important if you are not meeting as a team to begin with. And you don't have that team support, like as in elementary school, we met just by ourselves with the parent. It's good to have that type of support in case, you have extra concerns.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that support. That's great.
Yep.
Do you have any tips for how a conference should go? Like, how did you start your conferences? How did you focus on things? Do you have any tips there?
My first few years, I was horrible at doing conferences. I didn't really know what I was doing or the best way to do it. But after a few years, I took a position where I would write 2 to 3 bullet points per student that I wanted to cover. And then when the conference actually came, the first thing I would do after, we greeted each other and sat down and that sort of thing, first of all, I would never sit behind like a desk or something opposite the parent. I would sit, if I could, I'd kind of sit next to them or 90 degrees to them. It's because I think it shows a different sort of status and makes people feel comfortable or uncomfortable how you approach them. So I tried to sit maybe at a round table, so you're kind of sitting more next to them and across from them and that sort of thing. But I would also start the conversation by asking, first of all, do you have any questions? And so that's how I would start off all my conferences. Do you have any questions or concerns? And that sort of gave the parent the feeling like they were in control. Then I could go ahead and steer, usually their question or concern was my question or my concern, my bullet points. And so I could just steer it the way I wanted to steer it. It made the parent feel more at ease, like they were the one in control and their needs were being met and that sort of thing. And so it kind of put the whole situation in a different spin from the beginning. So.
Right.
How about you?
Right.
How did you run conferences?
Yeah, I agree. We pretty much did the same thing. Since we met as a team, we all might have 1 or 2 things that we wanted to address, or if there was a common concern across the team, there might be 1 or 2 things there that were common. But when parents arrived, now in middle school, we actually did sit at like a big group of desks, and there were 4 or 5 of us and then 1 parent. So it kind of ended up being almost like a circle of all of us around.
Cool.
So just thinking about the way you were sitting, and I know when I was in elementary school, I did the same thing with like sitting on the same side of the table to be able to show work and things like that. But anyway, once they came in and as we greeted each other, then I tried to start with some type of compliment, something positive, something to make the parents feel like their children were seen and appreciated.
Yes.
And starting off with that, and then put it in the ball in their court, basically. And what concerns do you have? Was there something in particular you wanted to talk about today? That type of thing. And again, like as you said, it lets them feel like they're kind of in the driver's seat there. They're a little bit more in control of the situation. And typically any questions or concerns they had were pretty much the same things that we were going to talk about anyway. So we would let them get their questions out. And then if there was something they didn't address during that time, then we would move on to any other concerns that we might have. And brainstorm and problem solve, try to figure out how we could come to some type of resolution or action plan for what we were going to do to try to help the student in whatever the circumstance might be.
Yeah. And then the compliment at the beginning is always a good idea. It's kind of like the Oreo method. Start with a compliment, end with a compliment, or something like that. Make sure that you're always starting them off well and ending with a good thought. So, yeah.
Right. So we would typically end with, if there was some type of action plan or there's something that we needed to put into place, we would typically end by recapping that and then scheduling some other time to meet and discuss and check and see how things were going. So that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about your student-led conferences.
Well, with student-led conferences, we actually had a team of 14 teachers in sixth grade. And so we had walls that folded up along like one whole side of the building. And so 4 classrooms could be made into one big classroom or one big area. And so we would use those 4 classrooms. And then we would make little pods of 4 or 6. And then the students would come in and we would have practice with them, little scripts and stuff. We would go through with their parents, I have a B in this class. This is why I have a B. I need to work on this, this area. Here is my literacy plan. Please read through it and sign it. They had a checklist of things that they had to go through, so they had an agenda, but they would go through their core subjects and any like literacy plans and stuff like that they had, and then the teachers would actually rotate to the different pods. And so the teachers were constantly on the go, rotating from pod to pod to pod. So the students would come in like 10-minute intervals and just take a pod somewhere in this giant room. And then as a teacher, you would try to find them, which was kind of fun. You had a schedule. You knew who was coming in at about what time. Then you would try to find them. You would quietly join the pod, kind of see where the kid was at with their script and everything. And then when there was a break in the conversation, you would introduce yourself and then explain, who you were and how they were doing in your class. See if the parent had any questions or anything. And do an action plan if you needed for that student, for that class. Maybe there was a behavior plan that needed to be done or a homework plan or something like that to get that student going. For 80 to 85% of the kids, it was pretty much just introduce yourself, give a couple positives, explain, they could do better with studying for tests, or, they could do better on their note keeping, work on their handwriting or something like that. And then finish with a positive, and then you're up into the next kid. And so it was very fast paced.
Yeah. So I'm trying to visualize. There were 4 to 6 kids in the room at a time at the different pods? So
4 to 6 of your kids. Yeah, and your whole team is in there. And then the other 3 teams, because we had 3 teams of 6th grade. Yeah.
Okay.
So, they're all in there at the same time.
Okay.
So you're seeing kids who aren't yours. And you're like, okay, I can skip that pod. Oh, I need to make it down to that pod. I have that kid. So, but since some kids were, like I taught on the Puma team, but a Wolf kid might have a Puma math just because of how scheduling worked, or something like that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Did you do that for quite a few years, or was that only a couple years?
All 6 years that I worked at the middle school were that. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
I really enjoyed it. It was, it took a total mind shift to get used to it. But it was really nice to have the kids in charge and leading. It kept the day going really fast. The day went over so quick.
Was this during a regular school day then? Like a whole school day?
Usually we had half a day on Thursday or half a day on Wednesday, and then a full day on Thursday or a full day on Friday for conferences. And then we might get, if it was like Wednesday, Thursday, we might get Friday off because there were nighttime ones.
Yeah, we had those too.
Yeah, so we might get the next day off, like Friday off,
Right.
to compensate for being there at night.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to schedule all of that? Or was it not bad?
First couple years, we scheduled with paper and pencil. So it was tricky. Then we went to a spreadsheet. They did it, I believe, I think they did it on Excel back then. It was, Google was just becoming a thing. And so it might have been on Google, but I think it was on Excel. And then it was a little bit easier. But because you could schedule about 12 to 14 kids at a time, it wasn't that hard to fit everybody in. Yeah.
How do you think the kids felt about that? Do you think that they enjoyed having that opportunity to talk about that, or
They
were they
hated
frustrated?
it.
They hated it. They didn't like it at all.
Being on the spot and having to lead. Yeah, know, your typical type A students really enjoyed, being in that leadership position, and I'm in charge, and I get to show mom everything I've done and my portfolio and everything. The majority of your kids were like deer in the headlights, even though we would take several days in each class and go through the script and have them record all their data for the script, and what's the one positive you want to bring up, and we'd have them write it out, and then what's a negative you want to bring up and have them write it out, and then they would practice with each other, a couple times and stuff, but they still felt unprepared and like a deer in headlights when it came to doing it with their mom and dad or their aunt and uncle.
But what a great experience for them.
Yeah.
That's fantastic for them to have that experience, to understand the preparation, to take part in that, and then to have that leadership opportunity, whether they wanted it or not. It's good to at least have that experience.
Yeah. And we had
That's great.
file folders in the front of the room, and every student had a file folder, and any returned work during the first quarter had to go in the file folder, and that was their portfolio that they had to show their parents or their guardians or whoever.
That's awesome. Well, do we have any other tips to add?
So you were talking about an agenda. Do you have something about an agenda that you wanted to bring up?
Well, I just have a very brief agenda, just kind of the positive comments, the letting parents ask questions, the concerns that you have, the action plan. So I just had a little sheet that would have all of that information on it and have that for each student. So it would help me stay on track, basically, and then could record anything there that we talked about during the conference time, that kind of thing. So I do have that on my blog. It's just a free sheet, a general agenda that people could adjust the way they want. But that kept me on track because I tend to need to know what I'm going to be talking about.
Oh, yeah. I think all of us need an agenda or bullet points or something to follow. So
Right.
And I have a resource in my store, student-led conferences, that has the scripts
great.
and the scheduling spreadsheet and that sort of thing. So if people are interested in trying out student-led conferences, that's available in my store. So
Yeah, we can put that in the show notes so that people can access that.
So great.
That's perfect.
Okay, so today we talked about different conference formats, using an agenda to help guide the conference, and the importance of creating an action plan, summing things up at the end of your time together, as well as different conference formats with students leading the conference as well. So make sure you check out the show notes for Ellie's blog post and my resource.
And be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
You just listened to the Teaching Toolbox. Follow them on your favorite platform for more episodes and share it with a friend.